Support for today's show comes from Bin 113. Looking to grow your winery's direct-to-consumer sales? Bin 113 leverages proven marketing expertise to help U.S.-based wineries like yours acquire and retain more customers. With over 100 years of combined experience, we make your D2C marketing as exceptional as your wine. Visit bin113.com to learn how we can help you sell more wine.
For us, not only as a producer, but as a region, Pinot Noir is our flagship. So of all the red grape varieties that are out there, it is probably one of the most difficult grape varieties to work with. It's very, very fickle. But when you treat it properly and you understand its nuances, it can yield something of extreme beauty.
Hello, Sandra.
Hi, Alan.
How are you today?
I'm good. Where are we going today? I'm so excited.
We're taking a trip out west. So we are going to Oregon, which is, as you probably know, one of the 4 largest wine producing states in the country. It is interesting in terms of the history. First grapes were planted in 1847. There are currently over 1,000 wineries in the state of Oregon.
Amazing.
And near and dear to my heart, Oregon and the Willamette Valley in particular, famous for its Pinot Noir.
Of course.
I am a Pinot Noir lover. And the reason for it is Oregon has a cool climate that makes it one of the very best places on the globe to produce Pinot Noir, not quite up there with Burgundy, but some of the wines being produced are, very, very much of a similar quality. So
they are. And you're talking new world wines to old world wine. And there is going to be a difference. And it's the same thing as saying, are you a right bank Bordeaux person or a left bank Bordeaux person? Some people are just simply going to prefer a new world, brighter, fresher wine. And instead of that funkier, I'm excited to see what this Pinot Noir brings on the nose, if we're going to get a little bit of that barnyardy fun funkiness. So that is more old world. So I'm excited to see what we get.
So can I answer that I prefer both banks?
Both banks. You're easy.
Why do I have to choose? At any rate, let's welcome in our guest.
Great.
So our new friend, Andreas Wetzel, from Wetzel Estate and Chateau Bianca, in Willamette Valley of Oregon. Andreas, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you along for the ride.
Thank you for having me.
That's great.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are, and a little bit about your winery, and sort of lead us into this conversation about great Oregon wines.
Yeah, your wine journey.
It's a long one, so I don't know if we have enough time in this podcast, so I'll try to abbreviate it a little bit. My journey actually started when I was in college. I was living in Portland at the time, and we already owned a winery here with some partners, also in the Willamette Valley, just kind of southwest of Portland. That winery was called Laurel Ridge. And so we were sending wine to my home state at the time, which was Alaska, and that's a whole nother story.
Wow.
But I got to get some experience around these wines, and really started to kind of cut my teeth on what we were doing here in the Pacific Northwest. Very intriguing. And then when I graduated, I returned home and opened up a wine distributorship. And at that time, I had a really amazing journey where one of my staff was extremely well-versed in wine, had a lot of connections in the wine world. So I got exposure to wines from Spain and wines from France and wines from South America. So I really had an opportunity to taste some things, which opened up my mind to what else was out there in the world. And then ultimately, my journey found its way back after being in Oregon for 4 years of college and experiencing the Pacific Northwest. It was just kind of like I knew I needed to come back. So when I came back to Oregon, my dad and I agreed that we would open up our own winery separate from the partnership that he had at the time with his friend. And that was kind of the beginning. So in 1990 was when we purchased the property here. There was nothing on this site. It was all in a government furlough program. So we planted everything, which today now consists of 40 acres of sustainably farmed and certified vineyard. And of that, we have multiple different vineyards, multiple different clones, all of which goes into our production, and then made into a number of different styles. So my winemaking journey really was kind of one that was experiential. So I have degrees in marketing and management and business. And all of my wine training came between not only some mentoring from some UC Davis trained winemakers. I did a lot of kind of remote classes at Davis, took some classes down there as well. And I read volumes of wine books. And then at the end of the day, it really all came down to practical experience. So a winemaker is not really given the reins of a winery until they have a vast amount of experience from vintage to vintage, because there's really so few textbook situations where this is the ideal vintage. Every year is a little bit different, and you have to adjust your winemaking protocol and decisions based on that. So here I am 35 years later on that journey, and have been running this day-to-day operation from both our vineyard as well as our winery for 35 years.
Wow. I always say, winemakers are you're an interesting breed of scientists, farmers, and artists.
Very true. We wear a lot of different hats.
So, Andreas, tell us a little bit about sort of the state of affairs in Oregon these days, and then help us zero in on exactly where you guys are located relative to this broader region that people are familiar with called the Willamette Valley.
Yeah, great question, Alan. I think it's really quite humorous to me in that, we are on the West Coast and oftentimes people will go, Oregon, where's that? So, we are one of the larger wine producing regions in the country. What makes us so special here is that the Willamette Valley is at the same latitude as Burgundy in France, where the most well-known grape varieties are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And for us, not only as a producer, but as a region, Pinot Noir is our flagship. So of all the red grape varieties that are out there, it is probably one of the most difficult grape varieties to work with. It's very, very fickle. But when you treat it properly and you understand its nuances, it can yield something of extreme beauty. And especially, I think, curious to most people is how well a wine like this can develop over time in the bottle. Most people have this preconceived notion that a variety like Pinot Noir is very short-lived. But if you were to look to Burgundy, who have, they have long, long histories of wines that they've kept in their cellars going back, many, many decades. We even find that in our own cellar. I've still got stuff from some of the first productions that we did here back in '91 from our own vineyard. And those wines, though they were losing their color, they still have a lot of beauty and elegance to them. So where we are in the Willamette Valley, which is the largest grape growing region in the state, the Willamette Valley actually starts from just south of Portland to north of Eugene and kind of follows the I-5 corridor. About 80 to 85% of all the grapes in the state are grown in this valley. Now, we are in a sub-AVA of the Willamette Valley known as the Duzer Corridor. And myself and some neighbors were involved in the petitioning process with the TTB to actually get that AVA to fruition. We had some hiccups there. COVID threw us a little bit of loop, but eventually we got the sub-AVA. And with the TTB, the thing that they are looking for is what geographically makes your area unique. So the Duzer Corridor is very much influenced by the maritime airs. If you were to go directly west from our winery, it takes you about 45 minutes to get to the Pacific Ocean. And through the coastal range, which allows you to pass through those mountains, we actually get the maritime airs on a fairly consistent basis, usually early afternoon. And that maritime air helps to keep our site cooler. And this has some huge effects as well as benefits to how we grow here. First of all, it helps to keep our fruit's acid profile. And the acid profile is really, really crucial in winemaking, especially when your focus in winemaking is producing wines that have bright acid, which means that these wines are very well suited for the dinner table. And you had mentioned earlier about how there's so much knowledge that still is needed to be shared with the consumer. There are wines that I consider sipping wines, and then there are wines that are considered food wines. And about 90 to 95% of the wines that we produce in the world are meant for the table. And we could talk a little bit more about how I view wine and its role in that setting. But ultimately, keeping that acid profile has become so much more critical, especially with climate change. So when I look back now 35 years, and when we used to pick our fruit, when our harvest would begin, that has become earlier and earlier. We are definitely seeing a shift. And for those areas in the Willamette Valley that are much more sheltered by the rolling hills, what we have here with that maritime air influence has been a huge plus. Now, granted, I wish I could say that I was this genius when we selected the site, and I definitely am going to go on. We were just really, really lucky. But that maritime air has a huge influence today, where the style of what Oregon has been known for is being retained in this unique viticultural area. So that's one factor. The other factor is the soil types. We are in an area which is known for what's called the Missoula flood soils. So if you like geology and want to study that, the Missoula floods were basically glaciers that were formed up in what is basically the area of Canada that started to thaw very rapidly, and through a process of kind of natural direction, those floods found their way through the Willamette Valley and are part of what our soils are. So they're marine sedimentary soils, they're fairly shallow topsoils, and a lot of fractured mineral characteristics in the substrata. And what this does is it really forces the vines to work very hard to seek out that water.
Which is something that a lot of people don't realize. You want your vines to struggle a bit. Everybody thinks that you've got to baby these vines, and no, they gotta get out there and struggle, and you're gonna get your better grapes.
Exactly, and the fact of the matter is that we actually only give them water when they are young. So once they've developed the root structure, we no longer water them. And so what that process is called is dryland farming. So our entire vineyard is set up to allow the vines to work with the existing water supply that it's given over the course of the winter. So, most people that have been to Oregon know how lush and green it is, and that comes from all the winter rain that we get, but that is all the water that our plants get until that point in time that they get picked.
Well, I would love to taste one of your wines.
Wonderful. Let's do that.
You know what? We're going to cut you a very quick commercial. And when we come back, we're going to pour your first wine.
At Toomey, 50 years of innovation starts with you. Every zipper, handle, and wheel perfected to perform so you can perform. Day in and day out. Toomey, made for you since 1975.
All right, Andreas, we are going to start with your Wetzel Estate Chardonnay. This is a 2019. Anything particular? How much Chardonnay is in here to start with?
Great question. So this is another thing to really point out about Oregon. So our pioneers, when they first started here in the North Willamette Valley, what they were wanting to do was they wanted to be very, very true to the grape variety. So we have some of the most strict label laws in the country. In Oregon, for you to be able to utilize the varietal name on the label, it has to be 90% of that grape type, and it has to be 90% from that vintage. So when you taste an Oregon wine, the fact that that varietal is on the label is guaranteeing you that that variety is what's used in here. And for this particular wine, this is 100% Chardonnay. It is a blend of two different clones that we have here on the property. It's UC Davis 108 and Dijon 76. Now, it's a very kind of winemaker's wine. And what I mean by that is that I have a very intentional style that I'm trying to create with this wine. What you'll notice is there's some very interesting, kind of really pretty oak notes to this wine. And I use primarily a combination of some newer American, but we also used in this particular wine German oak. So one of my coopers introduced me to this oak source, and I wanted to give it a try because of my German heritage. So if you look, Sandra, at the bottle, you'll see that coat of arms that's there. Yes. And that is my family's crest from Würzburg, Germany, which is in the Franken region of southern Bavaria. And all the wines that are produced under that logo are estate grown, single vineyard, and of smaller production. So the intentional style on this is I wanted a wine that kind of appeals to the consumer that likes that little bit of oak profile aromatically, but I'm also very much a proponent of making wines that are true to the vineyard source. So I don't want to show just the barrel. I want to show this beautiful blend between the wood and the fruit that comes out of the vineyard. So we use about 15% new oak on this. The wine goes through full malolactic fermentation, so that helps to soften and round it out. But again, the maritime air influences our acid profile, so we have nice acid retention, because here in the Pacific Northwest, we love to cook with fresh herbs, and these wines, especially the Chardonnay, will stand up beautifully for a dish that has either citrus in it or fresh herbs.
Can I say I'm getting a lot of herbs on the nose, like that dill or that really. I mean, I'm getting the oak, but there's definitely an herbaceous quality just on the nose, and then that nice the softness when you taste it. And I'm still getting a nice acidity. So it's it's not that typical oak butter bomb at all. It's a bit brighter than that. Than what what we normally think of as an American Chardonnay. This is very different.
I just wanted to have you weigh in for our listeners on you mentioned citrus and herbs, but what would you ideally pair this Chardonnay with from a food perspective? I've got to start thinking about making dinner, and tell me what you would recommend.
So I actually can speak pretty well to this because in another lifetime, I also had a restaurant. So for me, I'm very comfortable in the kitchen, and I love to cook and I love to experiment. And one of the things that I always kind of do as a habit when I'm preparing a dish, I think actually about the wine first, and then more about how I'm going to do the dish. So in this case, for this Chardonnay, because I know its structure, I know its acid profile, I know that I can be a little bit more heavy-handed from the standpoint of seasoning. So whether that is garlic, whether that is fresh herbs, whether that's rosemary or thyme or oregano or sage, anything like that, this wine will really stand up to it. So whether that is, you can do everything from poultry with this, or you could go with seafood. On the seafood, probably want to have something that has a little bit more spice to it, because seafood typically is more delicate. But if you're using, some strong herbs like or spices like cayenne or like a smoked paprika or something like that, this wine will really stand up to it. This wine has actually got enough structure to it where it's a great pairing for like duck, or like lamb would be a good combination as well. So, I mean, it just really, when you have a wine that has this kind of structure, there's just a much, much broader range of food pairings that you can do than if it's more monochromatic, if I can use that term.
Right.
What Sandra was saying earlier about not your typical Chardonnay. And by that, when we look back at history over the last 30 years, when Americans first started to go into restaurants and the bars and actually asking for the varietal and say, oh, I would like a glass of Chardonnay, rather than, oh, I'll have a glass of white wine. Right. So the atypical wine at that time was creamy, buttery, sweet. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, and peachy, sweet, oaky. Yeah, this is very different. This one is like you said, it's more herbaceous, softer on the oak, but it has a really nice mouthfeel, and the acidity that's a beautiful dinner wine. Much more flexible, much more food friendly.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
true to form, the Chardonnay that people used to be used to, as everybody kind of was replicating that style of wine, was this kind of more quaffing wine. It really wasn't a dinner wine,
Right.
and it had a very narrow profile. I mean, if you were into fondue or souffles, that was a home run pairing. Beyond
Yeah.
that, end of
I
story.
think I think everybody's kind of evolving and
Yep.
moving out of that. And as winemakers, we as consumers, we appreciate you winemakers helping us along that journey.
Right,
Um,
right.
the next wine we're going to taste is your Pinot Gris, correct? This is the one we're going to do next.
Yeah,
And this
so
one
Alan had
is
asked me to
Chateau Bianca.
Right. So Alan had asked me to kind of give you a little bit more information. So under our winery's umbrella, I have 5 different brands.
Hmm.
And again, this kind of comes back to my marketing background in that I'm looking for um, different brands for different demographics, different price points, and different winemaking styles. So our Chateau Bianca line of wines is really geared more towards the restaurant on-premise business. So that is that if you go into a restaurant and you're looking to have a glass of wine, those restaurants that are trying to enhance their dining experience with a premium varietal pour, you have to be kind of falling within a certain price point to meet that profile, that by the glass. And for the most part, Oregon wines are fairly expensive just because of the labor cost and the lower yields on what we grow per acre. And that's a real key factor. And I won't get too carried away with explaining what that means. But the Pinot Gris is all estate grown. It's sustainably farmed. As a matter of fact, Sandra, if you have that bottle in front of you and you spin it around on the back, you'll see a logo that says Live and Salmon Safe. And Live stands for Low Input Viticulture and Enology. That's our sustainable certification. The Salmon Safe means that it's tied to the Live certification in that we're very, very careful with the types of pesticides that we apply that are low residue, and we're very conscientious of our waterways.
And that information right there is so important. There's so many people out there that are so really go out of their way to have a lower profile of pesticides and have a cleaner experience, whatever it's food, vegetables, but to have it with your wine, it's I always tell people, look at the label, the information's on there. So your information is on this Pinot Gris, which I've got to say, it's so fun to go from the Chardonnay to this much cleaner, brighter. I'm like getting
Right.
fresh, clean apple, and there's still acidity there, but this is a quaffable wine. This you can just absolutely really enjoy with
This,
copious amounts.
well, this episode could go off the rails very quickly.
Very quickly.
Mm.
So Pinot Gris is our second largest production wine on the property.
Wow.
Again, this one is under our Chateau Bianca label, which is one of our brands, Wetzel Estate being the kind of frontline brand that we have. We do another line of wines under our Opulent label, which are all big, bold reds from Southern Oregon. We have our Butler Hill label, and then we also do a line of wines called Whimsical Wines, and that's a whole nother mix of different products. We consistently get great scores for our Pinot Gris, and like you said, Sandra, this is really beautiful tropical fruit aromatics.
Very light, very, very fresh. This is like a summer in a glass kind of a drink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a great example of what I love in winemaking in that this is all stainless steel fermented. So this is fermented under cool temperature conditions to capture all of those subtle, nuanced aromatics. This sees no oak and no additional winemaking manipulation on our part. The goal is really to express the vineyard. And I think that this really does it. What I love about this is trying to share with the consumer that Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio are the exact same grape, but they grow very, very different in different climates. And here in the Pacific Northwest, where the fruit matures very, very gradually, you get this really lush, rich mouthfeel, which I love. And Alan, you were earlier asking about food pairings. To me, this is heaven when you pair it with foods like salmon. That oily structure that you have from Pacific Northwest salmon and Pinot Gris is just a match made in heaven. I also like this with a wide range of other seafoods. Shellfish is a really great accompaniment. And I like it with sushi as well. It's just
Oh, this would
really,
be a great
like I
sushi
said, it's
wine.
pop. Yeah.
Really good. Really lovely.
I think you just gave me an out on having to cook tonight.
Well, let's cut to
I
our
think
next very
what
quick
we're doing is
commercial
sushi.
break and really fast because we've got two more fabulous wines to taste. So we'll be right back.
Venue Magazine is timely and timeless. Contemporary art and design, food and wine, architecture, motoring, yachting, music and film, and more. Find it all at venuemagazine.com.
All right, we are back and we are tasting Chateau Bianca Riesling. This is a 2022 and it says Van Duzer Corridor Willamette Valley, alcohol 11.5%. So I would love for you to tell our friends and viewers the significance between the alcohol percentage on a Riesling because everybody thinks that all Rieslings are sweet, super sweet. Please
Yeah. So,
debunk that.
I mean, with my my German background, obviously Riesling has a huge place in the wine world. It is probably the most technically driven grape variety out there, which is so apropos considering that's kind of the mindset of most Germans. They're very, very, they're very precise about how they do things. So Riesling can be made everything from bone dry all the way to sparkling, which we actually do. We make a Riesling-based sparkling wine called Cuvée Blanc, which is amazing. So if you ever get a chance to try it and you love sushi, it is like a match made in heaven.
I love the Riesling grape. I think, again, it is in America, we don't appreciate it enough. And it's such a food-friendly wine. And this one, literally, I take a sip and it's making my mouth water. It's just, I'm tasting like Jolly Rancher green apple. It's so delicious.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make there. Again, this comes back to what I was saying about the Van Duzer Corridor and the maritime winds. This is a really big effect on Riesling, and it retains that really bright acidity. And like you pointed out, Sandra, Riesling is one of those varieties where in the past, most of them were made very sweet. And if you have a sweet wine that doesn't have much acid backbone, it's very flabby and it comes across as kind of syrupy, sticky.
Kind of thick, right? Like thick in your mouth. Yeah.
So this wine is intentionally made in a style where we do have and leave some natural grape sugar. That's called residual sugar. But the big factor here to consider is that this wine has really gripping acid on the backbone. So you'll get a sip of that wine in your mouth. You'll get that upfront kind of honey note, a little bit of sweetness there. But then the acid comes in and it really cleans the palate. Now, here's the thing to consider. If you like spicy foods, and Sandra, on our break, we were talking about Thai food. To me, Asian fusion, Thai food, spicy Mexican is amazing with this kind of Riesling because you can get that, cayenne or chili pepper heat on your palate, and you have a sip of this wine, and it just kind of quenches the heat, and you're ready for the next bite. It's really amazing. And when you have that opportunity to make that pairing, you'll be surprised how wonderful it is.
That's a perfect example. It's just like the sweetness and the heat just balance each other out. It's like a wonderful little pairing. So I hope people get a little more brave and try, these Rieslings, but this is absolutely gorgeous. And my mouth's still watering. I'm sorry. It is really lovely. Not to miss out. I've been very excited. Probably the star of the show is your Wetzel Estates Pinot Noir Reserve. And again, Oregon is known for its Pinot Noir. The land there, the wind, the evening mist from the ocean, for this very persnickety little grape, you found its perfect home there.
Yeah, no, it's true. So where we are at the 45th parallel, we have what's considered a cool growing climate. So most of the grape varieties, again, like Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and Riesling and Gewürztraminer, they are really well suited for this climate. And one of the things that makes Oregon so special is that it's one of the few places in the world where this grape will do very well. And even though, and this is an interesting fact to share with you, California has significantly more acreage planted of Pinot Noir than we do as a state. And this is our flagship variety. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our basic geography is very different. We have a lot of rolling hills. If you've traveled in Europe and you know what those gentle rolling hills look like, I mean, that's basically transplanting it to Oregon. It's very lush. It's very green, lots of rolling hills. And we have a lot of different soil types. And all of those factors really contribute to how Pinot Noir comes together as a variety. So on our property, we have 5 different clones of Pinot Noir. The 2 oldest plantings that we have are Pommard and Badensville. And then as years went by, we added 667, 777, and 115. So this
just
one
so
is
for our listeners, you know, there's many clones of Pinot Noir, and even in one vineyard, you can have different clones simply by the sunlight, the slope. Each clone is going to respond differently and reflect different parts of the vineyard. So that's what makes this is so interesting. Then this particular, when you stick your nose in here, and I'm definitely getting like that wet earth, mushroomy, umami kind of nose, but there that bright cherry is there, like that nice spicy cherry, and it's exactly what I like to smell in a Pinot Noir. It's got the exact nose that I like to smell.
So from a vinification standpoint, what we do is everything is picked by individual blocks. Everything is fermented separately, and it's all done in open top fermenters. So what that means is we have a vessel that has a temporary lid that we put on and off of it. The cap, which is what's forming from the pumice, in other words, the grape skins, seeds, and meat, are submerged by a punch down device, which is done manually. We do that twice a day when we're checking both temperature and the conversion of sugar to alcohol. And then after fermentation is complete, we press those lots off and we keep them separate during the aging process, which gives us a great opportunity as winemakers to choose the best individual barrel lots for the final blend. And that always will vary. It's never the exact same combination because every vintage is a little bit different. And that is, it's a real benefit to us to be able to handle the lots that way. We use about 30% new French oak on
I was just about to ask that. I was about to ask you, because there's a lovely light oak to this. This is not overly done. This is really it's kept a brightness. I'm getting just a hint of vanilla more on the palate than in the nose, but it's very, very balanced and beautiful.
Yeah, again, for me, like I had said before earlier in the podcast, I'm really looking for wood to be a component, but not a pronounced component.
Not the driving factor, right?
Yeah, when you're cooking and you're using fresh herbs and things like that, you want to use a small amount, taste it, see if you like the addition, and then if you need a little more, you add a little bit more. But with the same thing with wine, we actually want it as a background. We don't want it in the forefront because we really want to show more the vineyard than we do what the Cooper can produce.
And you did the same thing in your Chardonnay as well.
Correct.
It's always easier to add more herbs, right, than to take them out if you've overdone it. So,
Alan, is this your favorite?
Listen, it's not a fair question, Sandra, because
it's a loaded question. I know it is.
Everybody who knows me knows that 99% of the wine that I purchase and enjoy is Oregon Pinot Noir. And
it's beautiful.
And I will say, Andreas, this is absolutely delightful. I don't need a food pairing with Pinot Noir. I can just sit, with a good book and enjoy a glass or a couple. But do tell our listeners, please, your thoughts. If you're cracking open a bottle of the 2019 Reserve, what are you serving with it?
So again, from my personal perspective and just my love of food and wine, Pinot Noir is by far, in my opinion, the most versatile of all red varieties.
Absolutely.
So by that, you can pair this with salmon again, like I recommended with Pinot Gris, but everything in the meat range that you want. And I'm almost a non-German in that I eat more Italian food than anything else because I love Italian food. So whether it's a red sauce or whether it's a braised piece of pork or lamb. This is great with a herb rubbed roast. You can do this with game dishes. It's just so food friendly and so versatile.
It's going to support a meal, not crush it. This is absolute going to support a meal.
Absolutely. I think the other thing too, Alan, that you kind of mentioned. So, the Oregon Pinot Noir glass, which was actually developed by Riedel here in the state to showcase Oregon Pinot Noir, is the perfect glass because, like you said, from a sipping standpoint, this wine will open up with more air and, swirling around the glass. Right. And you really start to get more nuanced, subtle characteristics coming out as that wine sits there at room temperature.
Agreed. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, where our listeners can find your wines. So can you share a little bit, not just about their ability to buy your wines online, but also, what about the winery itself, tasting room, events, and things that you've got coming up that might excite people to come and visit?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different options. As you mentioned, Alan, we do have a retail tasting room right here at the winery, and literally 30 feet behind me where we're recording this is a major state highway that takes you from the state capital of Salem right to the Oregon coast. So you would pull off that highway right into our parking lot. We have a tasting room that's open every day from 10 to 5. And you can find our wines online, which is at www.wetzelestate.com. And then in addition to that, we do sell our wine in a number of markets across the country. Connecticut happens to be one place where we do sell our wines. We sell our wines in New York and New Jersey, and in the upper New England states, a little bit in the Midwest, and then obviously in Oregon, it's our anchor. We also have some international marketplaces where we sell our wines. We sell our wines in Mexico, in Canada, in Asia, in Japan, Korea, and Singapore. So we've got a little exposure, so it's kind of fun.
That's exciting.
So you may recall, Andreas, we had this conversation several months ago. I was thrilled having dinner with a friend in New York one evening and finding your Pinot on the wine list. And I'm like, oh my God, I know him. So to me, you're like a rock star.
Yeah. Let's not get carried away that way. I just do what I love, and it's very, very enjoyable when people have an opportunity to share the end result, and that's really what drives me. This is a business that requires enormous amounts of resources and a lot of time and energy and passion. And at the end of the day, it's not what most people assume, that we're all filthy rich. We're really farmers at the end of the day. And for me, I have the calluses to show for it. And it's just what I love to do. And I think Sandra really hit on a very key personal note for myself, in that wine is, it's something that a lot of people don't really understand. It is thrown into the basket with all the rest of the alcohols. And it's very unfortunate because it is the one product that is 100% natural. And that, what I mean is that the grapes that are produced are a byproduct of Mother Nature. And every year she does something a little bit different, and hence wine is different every single year. So that's part of the journey and the excitement for me about wine, because each vintage and each wine is like a child. And each one has its own unique personality and characteristics, which is so fun for me. I can actually taste a wine from a vintage, and I remember what the weather was like and what the conditions were and what they yielded for that finished product. Other alcohols like distilled spirits and beer, the consumer is expecting a profile to be consistently the same from one year and 1 month to the next, where wine is just not like that. And that is the fun thing for me. It's like Christmas every single day. It's always something different.
Love that. What a great place for us to wind up here today. So Andreas, on behalf of Sandra, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. Let's repeat, wetzelestate.com. We highly recommend these wines. I don't need to go on and on about the Pinot, but the Pinot is just, it's delightful. And when we finish recording, there's a very good chance I'm going to have another glass of it, or a glass of it. So Andreas, thank you again. And it was a pleasure. Oh gosh, we need to get on a plane and go to Oregon yesterday.
Yes, we do. Oh, I would love to. And it's just it's so interesting, like you said, when you think of Oregon, you think of these lush gardens and everything. They have so much rain and uh, just a challenge, interesting area for the Pinot Noir grape to be so happy. But his expression of the wines, they're not over oaked. They're just enough spice to them. It reflected in all four of these bottles that we had.
Yeah.
Really.
So have you had a chance to be out in Willamette? Have you
I
had?
have not been yet.
So I was out there about 15 years ago or so. We were on a business trip. We had a client just south of Portland, and we had a number of hours to kill before red eye home. And the client's like, "Well, you're gonna go taste some wine, aren't you?" And we're like, "Are we that close?" He goes, "Make a left out of the building, and you'll see the first winery." It was that close. It to me is what Napa was 30 or 40
Mm.
years ago. It's approachable. The people couldn't be any nicer, and the wines are just stupendous. I've not been down to Andreas's place or the Van Duzer Corridor, and I very
Mhm.
much want to get there at some point because I think it's so interesting what he had to share with us about the maritime air, as he
Yeah.
called.
Well, that's what Oregon's known for. Yeah,
Just so
exactly.
amazing. But seriously, these wines were wonderful, highlighted for me, of course, by the Pinot.
Hmm.
But I got to tell you, we will be doing a little bit of tasting here at home
Oh,
later.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Because
And this Riesling, really fun. All four of these, but the Riesling was exciting. It was really just
awesome,
like really explosive, really fun.
awesome.
I hope
So
people start
Sandra,
drinking more of
this
them.
this was delightful as always.
As
It's so much
always.
fun, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we'll be back together in front of the White Lotus wall for the next recording.
Yay.
As I will be coming back to Connecticut one of these days. So
Wonderful. I
have a good
can't
rest of the
wait.
day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please remember to subscribe to Wine Across America on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.